Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Pro-Spectives. This week, I am super excited to have Brandi May with Busy Bee Books and Courses. Welcome, Brandi.
You. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, yes, we're excited to have you. Why don't you just start by telling the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I write and illustrate children's books. The very busy bumblebee. That's our first one.
I
Excuse the
love it.
blur. And then Fearful Freddy Froggy. That's the second one. We have a new one coming out, hopefully sooner rather than later. And that's Danny Dragonfly Feels Doom. We were just talking about that, how the blur comes on. So they're books for social emotional health. They support kiddos in the classroom. They also support parents, and it talks about big feelings. So my biggest thing is helping families connect and move past that. As parents, I feel like we have to keep it together. And, and
Mm,
then and then the kids, like, they feel like they have to keep it together.
yeah.
And if we don't have that open dialogue, so that's what my books are really about, is talking about big emotions with little guys. But then also, have you ever read a book and you're like, a children's book, and you're like, oh dang, that hit home?
Mhm.
I like to say that those do that. So you're like, wow, that message, maybe I could slow down and appreciate life. Like, maybe there are fears that are holding me back. So right now that's what I do. And I go to a lot of schools, and I actually I'm going to gone to Concord Hospital and spoken to some of their folks over there, and I'm working on creating digital courses for curriculums for schools. And yeah, we can get into all that, but that's what I do.
Awesome. I love it. So, how did you find your way to this business?
Okay. So during COVID, I used to be a craniosacral therapist. And what that is I basically we had talked about that. And I
Yeah.
think you said you knew what that was. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I did something called somatic emotional release, and I learned a lot about tuning into the body and the trauma that stores inside of the body. And a lot of people would say, like, I'd have guys come in and be like, "Oh, I have a rotator cuff issue that has been here for 30 years because of my baseball injury." And while that is also could be true and definitely probably didn't help it, a lot of times there was a story from, like, a pain story, an emotional story behind it. When I held the tissue, I could hear a story, I could feel it. And once we addressed that, it would go away. And so, like,
Mhm.
as a massage therapist, I would see people there, like, coming in with the same stuff. And I'm like, something is missing here. This is
Mhm.
not what's happening. So it's not um giving the patient the capabilities to heal on their own, which I
Mm.
truly, truly believe. And with this, like, this new direction that I've been guided to, has really taught me that we have an innate ability to truly heal on our own if we have
Mhm.
the tools. And so I thought, and a lot of it's from childhood, right? Like, we know there's no surprise there.
Mhm.
A lot of old belief systems and pain points that, when we don't address those, we end up acting out all throughout our lives, all throughout relationships, different places, different faces, but the same things keep happening. And until we tune in to figure out what that is inside of us, um, we're going to keep looking for something else to fix it. And I truly believe, when we teach our kiddos, that they do have answers within them, and teach parents as well. That I honestly believe that addiction, codependency, I believe that you know, um, even unemployment, I think those types of things will really turn around because we start to understand where we belong in the world, and that we do belong here. So that's how I started anyway. So long story long, I get I get a little passionate into the message. But so I started doing cranio, and 2020 hit. I mean, I'd been doing craniosacral for a long time, and body work for like almost 16, 17 years or something. And then that hit, COVID hit, and I couldn't see patients anymore.
Mhm.
And so I just got I had connected with a publisher, and I had started to write a book, a self-help book, and it wasn't in alignment with the publisher. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, what am I going to do here? So, and to be honest with you, the book was really hard to write. I wasn't in the right spot yet. It was super traumatizing. So, so I was walking one day with my son, he was a baby, and I got Busy Bee download. Within minutes, I had a book written. And so,
Mm.
and it rhymes and it's filled with sight words. I don't know how to spell. I mean, I'm not fast. I have no, so grammar, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't even know sight words. I'm not gonna lie, I did not know. And so I had a woman who used to work for Scholastic actually, was like, "Do you know how many sight words are in this book?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"I have no idea." And she's like 40 plus. And then she said there's lots of it rhymes and so yeah, so I just came up with this book. I was given this book, and then it
Mhm.
was my job to carry it out. So, which is a whole nother story.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're not the only entrepreneur that has that feeling, right? Like even if they don't have the words to describe it in that way, that feel a calling to do something or an inspiration kind of to do something. I hear that over and over and over again. And I was recently having a conversation, right? I have a senior and she's in high school trying to figure out like, well, what am I going to be passionate about? And she has kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, but doesn't really know. And I found two things to be true. One is sometimes it's just an idea. And it's not so much that the entrepreneur is so passionate initially about that idea. It's more like they're solving a problem or and that's what they're passionate about, right? And it just turns into this beautiful thing. And then the other is people that it's inspired within them. They are very passionate about this specific thing and it like evolves. So I think when we talk about business and entrepreneurship and leadership even, and sometimes that can feel very analytical, it can feel very structured, it can feel very numerical in some ways, but when you really get down to it, that's where it comes from. It comes from some sort of spark inside or some sort of inspiration or um, calling to do something which is deeper than what you can necessarily put on paper.
I love that you said that too. That is such a brilliant insight because that is such a brilliant insight. I like want you to go and talk to high schools because or me, like not even just like a couple years ago, please. Because sometimes your job isn't the big purpose. Sometimes your purpose is problem solving.
Mhm.
Sometimes your purpose is the in between, like to figure it out, the one that integrates the systems. Like that's how your brain operates, and which makes it a beautiful world, right? Because all of us have
Yes.
these different talents. But I think so commonly we think it has to be this big, and it took me a long, like as we maybe could get there, I hope. It took me a long time until just like a couple weeks ago to figure out how this is all going to fit. And I
Mhm.
just kept following these breadcrumbs. And I'm like, I don't know where you're taking me. And honestly, I was very angry that my other career was out the door. And so, like,
Mhm.
so holding on to that, I couldn't move forward. But to think
Sure.
that we all have, and I think entrepreneurs think we have to do it all on our own.
Mhm.
And there's a book called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. And
Mhm.
I was just talking to this woman that I'm collaborating with. Collaborations are now. We're starting to realize like many hands. What is that? Many hands make.
Light work.
Yes, yes. And it is. I feel like it truly is an opportunity for all of the gifts to be combined. And I know I can get in my head and be like, how am I going to get this out there? What am I going to do? And so it stops me. But my job is just to keep my flow going and then
Mhm.
ask in my way, I ask for guidance, like show me what you want me to do with this. And the
Yeah.
right people show up with their
Well,
passion. right? Like,
I feel like that's the only way I got unstuck, was getting out of my head, because I kept very similar, I was working for somebody else, and or for a corporation, and I kept thinking about the how, the how, the how. I could not figure out how, which just leaves you in a state of stuckness, right? It leaves you, which is like literally the worst feeling. And when I was able to stop thinking about the how and just think about what do I want to be doing every day, da 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 da, and truly the solution arrived, right? And then it was just taking the next right step. Like, I only need to worry about this step and maybe the one that comes directly after. I don't need to focus on 10 years from now. I have a great coach, um, a financial coach, funny enough, and she said this very powerful thing to me, and she said it just off the cuff. And I think I spoke about it when she was on the podcast earlier. She said, "You don't have to worry about that now, Jessica. The person you'll be when it's time to make that decision is not the person you are today. Trust the person you will be when it's time to make that decision." And it was like, whoa, you're right. Like, I'm trying to make a decision for the future based on circumstances of today. But the circumstances might be entirely different when it actually comes time to make that decision. It was very, very powerful for me.
ugh,
And I think it's the same thing. I think so many of us get caught in the details. Well, how am I going to pay for this? And how am I going to do this? And where's the time? And there is a place for that, but one step at a time. For example, in real estate, the first step is just getting licensed. Like,
mhm.
nothing else happens until you go through that. So instead of not starting that licensing program, not starting that class because you're worried about how you're going to do the work in 6 months, a year, whatever, figure out, how do I take the class today?
Mhm.
And then by the time you're done that class, in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks, when you've passed, you will be a different person than you were 2 months ago. And then you'll be able to answer the next question because you'll have additional information. So powerful, I think.
Gold. I was like, oh, I need to write this down. And then I'm like, oh, right, this is being recorded. I mean, that is next level. I have not ever heard it be, I mean, how many times one of the things that I was going to say when you asked the best advice, I'm like, should I say one step at a time or one day at a time? Or
Yes.
and I'm like, wow, this is exactly where this conversation is going. And it really, truly is. And I do believe that there are forces greater than us that give us these inspirations. We are gifted these gifts. One of the things I talk about with schools is we're gifted these gifts to, you know, to follow through with. And I feel like when we don't, especially if it's truly like in our heart, it gets so uncomfortable until you just like it takes on a life of its own. It for me, it'll eat me away until I do the next thing. So that resistance I'm learning is, I mean, the very hard way I've learned is just you just got to keep going forward. And like you said, just have that faith, like that when the time comes, you'll be ready and the
Mhm.
people will be there and the money will be there.
It's
And
funny, we were just talking about hummingbirds and how they're very representative in my life of, similar to a busy bee, they're buzzing around, but they're also sucking all the nectar out of life, all the goodness, all the sweetness, and enjoying and fluttering and having fun. And but it's also about, in my opinion, following the light, follow the sun, follow the flowers. And that speaks to the next step too. Like, yes, to be an entrepreneur, to find your path, there are obstacles. It requires um, commitment, discipline, all these things. And also, it kind of should be easy. And so, what I mean by that is not like easy, but it should be natural. It should be, and to your point, when you're not in alignment, when you're going down the wrong path, there are little clues. And talking about cranial sacral, and we're getting a little woo woo today, but I think it shows up in our body. It starts super small with fatigue. And if you don't listen to the fatigue and you don't rest and you don't spend the time, then that turns into, allergies or inflammation in our body that turns into allergies, that turn into migraines, that turn like your body will be like, all right, we're like not in the right place. And they'll keep tapping you on the shoulder until you pay attention.
Mhm.
And and that's not to say that everybody that gets sick is because they're not paying it, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying we have clues.
Mhm.
There are clues to that aren't always um conscious or something that you can um like think away. Sometimes it's just about sitting with that and taking quiet time and or taking time with family or whatever the thing is. Sometimes what you have to do is stop thinking, right? That's why meditation is so powerful. um
Really? Yeah. Yeah. If I could just like spin off of that real quick, I would love to. Yeah, so that's been my story actually. So I've been like I am getting over this long health journey and physical, emotional, mental, all. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. Like it's so funny because I know this. I knew this. I studied this. I knew like thoughts, emotions, physical, they they are all one. And so this, yeah, I got to tell you about that too. So, we don't have enough time. But that is one of my biggest passions is teaching kids and families to really learn that inside voice because it whispers, and it's kind and it's gentle, and the voices of the ego that want us to keep like to stay loved and accepted will scream at us, and that's what they learned. It's our job to nurture that part of us. We want to just fight it away, but like that needs the most love, and like so those are the types of things. So those voices kept me going and going and going and going, and it's like, trauma, PTSD, like it takes on a life of its own. And so like you really like starting to learn how to identify what those signals are can be really challenging. And so like so it's really interesting because and so that's kind of where these things align. So I was telling you that I didn't know where this was all going until like 2 weeks ago. I got hooked up with a woman, not in Women's Business League, but another networking group that her name is Rachel Bear Larry. And what she does is she does a lot of things, but she helps people. She's obsessed with like the scientific part of like that emotional connection connected with the body, like we're talking about today. So she really likes to figure out the how it works, right? So for me, I'm all about the emotions. Like I can feel my way through life. So, I say God brought me to this divine intervention came in and brought me this woman who actually teaches people. So she's a consultant for the Heart Math Institute. And the Heart Math Institute is I wrote it down to get it clear. It's a nonprofit that's teaches physical, mental, and emotional systems to align with to teach the intuitive guidance system so that we can so like what we're talking about, so we can pair all these things together. And it's true. I mean, there's scientific research, and this company's been around for like 30 something years. I think I just looked it up so I could tell you when we got here. But anyway, so she works with this Heart Math Institute, and she does a lot of teaching. But the biggest thing that's supportive for me is she teaches people how to create courses that go into schools and teach emotional. Like this is exactly what I was looking for. But I
yeah.
felt like I was telling you, I have all of these ideas. Like you'll see little post-it notes of ideas of how I was going to do these things. But I think sometimes when you have a real idea person and you don't have the structure behind it, you need that pairing, right? So, and here's where it gets really cool. So she's like, let me help you get into these classrooms because what you're talking about is gold. And I'm like, it's real stuff. And if these kids had this knowledge, and the parents. So I want to do it for parents and I want to do it for schools, create this curriculum around heart-centered intuitive development and building a strong inner world so we can protect ourselves,
Yeah.
including from illness. And so we talked about that. And would you know that she needs a book illustrated? Her mom and her have been writing a book for years. And the story is about her going to her grandmother's house, which is like a refuge, which was the same story for me. So the three of us all have the same story backline. And I'm like, I love my drawings. I really take pride in like the emotional, like I teach emotional, can you see there? Like,
Yeah.
you can't. But anyway, yeah, so the eyes, right? So I take a lot of pride in that, but it's bubbly art. I really like the indie watercolor art. She's
Yeah.
like, that's what I'm looking for is that art. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this joy was just dropped onto my lap. So we're exchanging our services to like help better
Each
these
other.
communities together, and even our backstories align. So it's like I was waiting, I'm not even kidding you, like since 2017, 20, no, 20, definitely 2020. I'm sitting around like, what do you want me to do? I have
Mhm.
all of this healing journey, all of this knowledge. Like I didn't even know art was going to come back into it. I hadn't done that since I was a kid. But yeah, and then so I get aligned with this woman, Rachel. She owns this soul story company, and it all falls into place. So I guess what I'm trying to say is yes on the intuitiveness, yes on the body, the body keeps the score. And also if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure it out, hang in there, because there are people that want to find you and want to help you get your message or your product or your whatever it may be. If it's on your heart, it's supposed to be here. That's how I
Mhm.
believe, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if you're still waiting to figure out what that is, like, stay strong,
Yeah.
right? Have you
And
experienced
just
that? Yeah.
be open to it. Like, so, I don't think I think that there was a point in time in history where like our parents went to work for one company and they stayed there for 20, 30 years, whatever, they retired and there was a pension and none of that. And then I think it kind of swung to like, no, it has to be your full passion all the time, da 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 da. And which is hard to find when you're working for somebody else. And I think millennial or this younger generation, they're really trying to find this kind of balance thing, and now they can work from home, and it's just like anything else, it takes time to figure out. But ultimately, what we're finding is sometimes your job isn't your passion. Sometimes that thing that's on your heart is something that you're doing part time or after hours. And your job is what allows you the space to do that, until so, it doesn't always have to be, I mean, it's beautiful when it can be what you spend your time with, but just because it's a side project doesn't that maybe is the real contribution that you're making, so to your point, like keep it open and you never know what opportunities can come.
Yeah.
You're right, we definitely need to do another one to talk further because we're running
Okay.
out of time, but let's jump into the rapid fire. Where is your favorite place to vacation?
Okay, so I like northern Florida, like St. Augustine area. I love the old
Okay.
Georgia trees. I love that. Anything coastal. We just moved from the coast. But anything coastal, it just takes my heart away. So yeah.
Yeah, the beach. I love it.
Yeah. Mhm.
What is, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself?
Resilient.
God, that's so important. More important than anything, I think, sometimes, to be
Yeah.
able to get back up and keep going.
Mhm.
I love it. Um, and you kind of touched on this, but the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Go slow. Be
Mm.
easy. Be easy with yourself. Be gentle. Yeah.
There's a wonderful podcast. Oh, why am I drawing a blank on it? It's called, hold on, I'm gonna look. I don't usually look at my phone while we're podcasting, but I have to share this with you because of that comment. Um, my library. It is called Hurry Slowly with Jocelyn K. Glee. Hurry Slowly. And I actually was talking to another entrepreneur. I think it was on the podcast, and she was talking about sometimes then you need to slow down to speed up.
My girlfriend and I say that all the time.
It's so true.
Finding that center. If you're just moving, again, it's the same thing. If you're just moving out of fear, it's like it's minimal. Like you get minimal results, in my opinion.
I
But when
agree.
it's intentional creation,
Yeah.
it very much flows. Yeah.
Love it. So how can people get in touch with you?
Okay, so my site is www.busybeebooks.biz. You can find me on Facebook, Brandi May, on Instagram, Brandi May 222. Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, but not as much as I should be. So I think that's great.
Are any of us really on LinkedIn as much as we should be?
Still learning. Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody that, that feels called. And I'm so grateful that you brought me here today. And I hope I didn't talk it all away.
No, it was great. I think people will be really excited to hear from us. So we will see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.